I'm not sure if I start yet. I don't think I start right now.
So we might as well get things started since you've got the pane up and it's about 10:15. So welcome back, everyone. I'd like to welcome to the screen to the stage Noel Welsh. Noel is a Scala consultant. He's the organizer of ScalaBridge London, and he's going to tell us about some of the upcoming plans there. So let's give Noel a round of applause.
All right.
I will step off the stage.
Okay, thanks for the introduction, and thanks everybody for coming along to my talk. As I said, I'm going to be talking about ScalaBridge London. I'll just get a stopwatch going so I don't go too over time. I think it's unlikely. Right, so I want to talk about ScalaBridge London, but we have really just started this group. So this talk is more about what we're planning to do, hence the title, The Plan, than about what we have done so far. So let's get into it. I think the obvious first question is, what is ScalaBridge London? Speaking very prosaically, we're a group of people learning or teaching Scala. This is what we spend a lot of time doing, but this really only captures a small part of what we're trying to do. So taking something of a larger view, a more philosophical view, we're trying to increase diversity within the Scala community and within the wider programming community. And learning Scala just happens to be a big chunk and a very visible chunk of how we're trying to achieve this goal of diversity. I'll talk more about this soon. And finally, I should say that we're not, in fact, a new group. We did run in 2019 into 2020 until COVID shut us down. However, we've only just restarted a few months ago in 2023, and it's largely a new group of people. So we do have some experience, but we are in some ways starting again fresh. Right, now that we know a bit about what ScalaBridge is, how are we going about trying to achieve our goal? And I think of this as having three pillars. And the first pillar is learning Scala, learning to program. This is the obvious part, but not the only part. The second pillar is building a supportive community. And the final pillar is having enough time for change to happen. So let's talk about all of these in a bit more detail. So learning Scala is how we spend most of our time. As I said, it's the most obvious thing, obvious part of what we're doing. And there are really two routes we have for learning Scala. The first is we have a curriculum which is aimed at people with little or no programming experience. So trying to bring new people into the programming community, Scala community. I'm going to talk about this in just a moment. And then the second route we have is for people who have more programming experience. And for them, we have more of a free-form style. We try to find the intersection of what they're interested in learning and what we can deliver and go with that. And that's a little bit of a challenge. I'll discuss that as well. But let's first turn to the curriculum for new developers. So this curriculum is aimed at people with little or no programming experience. A typical example would be someone who is changing fields to programming. And we're not assuming they have a STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics background. And this is important because it determines the kinds of examples we can use and the prior knowledge we can assume. So what are the goals of our curriculum and how do we go about it? So first goal, let's get the obvious one, learning how to program. We want people to be relatively competent at the level of junior, maybe advanced junior, maybe sort of mid-level programs if they complete everything we have there. The second goal, and this is a little bit more interesting, I think, a little bit less obvious perhaps, is to have enough rigor that people who can pick up further topics in computer science if they're interested in. So we want to introduce them to some of the jargon, some of the formalisms, so if they go grab a textbook, they won't feel completely lost. That's something I find a bit missing in other curriculums I've looked at, which are aimed at the same type of people. Third goal is to touch on a few different domains of professional practice. We're assuming students don't know too much about computing coming to this curriculum. We want them to see some of the range of opportunities that are available and to get a feel for what they enjoy doing. So that said, in terms of the goal, what do we cover? Our curriculum is divided into 4 parts. The first part is creative coding, and for us that means creating pictures like the following, which is taken from our curriculum. Creative coding is good because, well, you don't need math to do it. It's very accessible to people because you have this output on the screen, very visual, which directly relates to the structure of the program. So there's a nice connection between the two that makes it quite easy for beginning programmers. And in this section, we teach fundamentals, things like how to use the tools, using SPT, using the editor, the substitution model of evaluation, structure recursion over natural numbers, functions and function composition, as well as a few basics like expressions, types, and so on. So that's the first part. And this part is complete, and if you're interested, go have a look at the book Creative Scala, which is free and online. Put that into Google, you'll find it. Second part is about data science, and we're looking at this through a computational lens, which means using randomization instead of, if you've done statistics, the typical analytic asymptotic approximations. That was a bit of a mouthful. I'm glad they got that out okay, such as the normal distribution and the t-test. This part is still in the planning stage, although we do have some of the software infrastructure in place. Some of it was developed in the Google Summer of Code project, which I believe is going to be discussed in the next talk. Also drawing inspiration from some of the recent data science curriculums there, like the Data Rate program at Berkeley. Third part is web development. Oops, I should have said for the second part, so I've talked about data science, but in terms of programming concepts, it's really about defining your own data structures and working with collections of data. So map, filter, fold, flat map, and so on. So third part, web development. The goal here is to build something that's a hybrid between a text adventure game and a scavenger hunt. So a game that people can play with their friends on the mobile phones and has a server for coordination between multiple players. Still in the planning stage here, but we are building out the software infrastructure. And here, in addition to all the web development concepts that people will encounter, we'll be looking at the effect type like CATS.io, reactive programming on the front end, and really getting deeper into the topics we've seen previously. And the fourth and final part is implementing a programming language interpreter. We have a bit of material here implementing a very basic interpreter, and we're not quite sure where we're going to go with it. One idea is to develop a web compiler or interpreter that targets WebAssembly. And the idea here is to just go beyond the boundaries of the JVM a little bit and show people how to interact with the kind of wider computing system going on here. Still undecided here though. Okay, so that's the curriculum and the skills, the first pillar of what we're doing. Let's move on to community. ScalaBridge brings together 3 main groups: students, mentors, and employers, and each has a role to play. We've already discussed students, so let's talk a bit about the mentors. Mentors are more experienced Scala developers, but they don't have to be senior developers, which is a common misconception. To be a mentor, all you need to know is a little bit more than the students you're helping out. The role is to guide students through material, help them with problems, help them get unstuck, but not ready to do too much explicit teaching. At least that's the desire, because teaching is a bit of an art, and we don't want to just throw them in as teachers without training. So hoping the material that we're providing in terms of lesson plans and Creative Scala and so on will do a lot of that teaching role, and they can just clear up confusion. There also isn't a hard distinction between students and mentors, and people can change roles at any time. That does happen. So, for example, at our previous meeting, we had 2 groups, one looking at the fundamental material, part 1 creative coding, and then we had another session where we looked at generic derivation in Scala 3, and we had a number of mentors attending that as students. So people don't have to get locked into a particular role. They can follow their own interests. Employers provide venues and food and potentially jobs, which is very important. So usually an employer is someone who's hiring, and they usually give us a short speech at the start of a session, and we're very grateful to all the people who will be hosting us in the future. I'll talk about that in a moment. So the goal of all of this, beyond the learning, is to develop a professional network. We really want to have a strong network that is supportive of diversity. We want our students to have trusted people they can turn to for professional advice, and we want them to have employers they know provide a good working environment for them. And we also want our mentors to become superstars in the industry so that they can grow their careers and then they can bring diversity into the places where they're working. So that's very important to us. We're also trying to normalize diversity with what we're doing here. So that seeing people of different skin colors, genders, accents, so on, doesn't become so unusual. However, we're not the diversity police. At ScalaBridge London, this is something that may be different to some of the other bridges, if you're aware of the other bridges. We don't explicitly say who is and isn't welcome at ScalaBridge London. Anyone who agrees to our values can attend. The values are around diversity. If you have a problem with diversity, then you probably shouldn't attend, but if you don't have a problem with diversity, then you're welcome to attend. And as part of getting as wide a reach as possible, we are running online sessions in addition to the in-person sessions. All right, let's talk about time. So developing a network and learning to program are both long-term endeavors. So if we're going to achieve our goals, we need to be around for long enough for this to happen. So our current aim is to run for 2 years and then evaluate what we've done. And we're using 2 criteria to evaluate ScalaBridge. The first thing is, does it work? Are we actually achieving what we're trying to do? Are the people who are looking for jobs getting them? Are people learning more? Are the mentors growing as well? These are fairly obvious things. The second criteria is sustainability. We're quite unusual in what we're trying to do, and does that mean we're just idiots? So we need to determine whether running something like ScalaBridge London is actually something we can continue to do, or does it take up too much time and energy? And so far we're doing okay, but that doesn't mean that we'll continue to do okay in the future. So that's very important to us as well. We don't want people to burn out trying to do this. So far we've run 3 online meetings. Online meetings are good because they're very easy to organize and they have a wide reach, but they're not good for the social aspects. Online conversation is quite awkward compared to in-person conversation. I probably don't need to emphasize that too much. We know the differences between in-person and online events. I'm sure we've been to lots of online events. We have our first in-person meeting next week, and I think this will be a big boost for us to get together in person, see people face to face. And a big shout out to ClearScore. I don't know if there are any ClearScore people on this call, but if you are, thanks. They're our first host, and we have more hosts lined up for the rest of the year. So that's good. So that's an overview of what we're planning to do. I just want to talk about what we've learned so far from what we're doing, and then talk about how you can get involved if you're interested. So what have we learned? Firstly, finding students is a challenge. Reaching mentors is relatively easy for us because we're well connected to the Scala community. But students are, by definition, not necessarily in the Scala community, and not necessarily in any particular community, so it's a lot more work to reach them. We're fairly small at the moment. I'd say we have around about 15 students. I don't think that's a bad thing, because it's much easier to manage a small group than it is to manage a large group. But we do need to have a continual stream of students if the group is to survive in the long term. So that's something we have to think about in the future. Finding venues has also surprisingly been a challenge. It wasn't this hard when we first started running in 2019. On the other side of COVID, and also having a bit of a recession in the UK, people just don't have the budgets they once did for hiring and so on. And these type of events usually fall under the hiring budget. So we've struggled a bit more than I expected to find venues. I'm hoping that next year things will pick up and people will have their new budgets for the year and be willing to spend some bit on hosting us. Another challenge is providing a good experience to the experienced students. So the people who are new to programming or relatively new to programming tend to be more homogenous in what they know and so more willing to just undertake the curriculum as we prepared. For the people who are more experienced, they tend to be more diverse in what they know and more diverse in what they want to learn. So accommodating them is a bit of a challenge. I'm not sure what we'll do here, but I'm hoping that when we get together in person, I can talk with some of these students and get a clear idea of what they're interested in and figure out a plan to help them. And also, curriculum development is a big task and something we have to chip away at over time. So if you heard of that, you're interested in joining in, what could you do? Wrong way. Did I not save? No, I must have not saved. Doesn't matter. So a few things that you can do. Firstly, you can run your own group if you want. We have a fair bit of material. You can join our online meetings if you want. We alternate. The goal is to alternate between in-person, online every 2 weeks. So online meeting every 4 weeks. So we're trying to support other groups starting up with our material, with our model of teaching, and so on, to show other people how they can do this with somewhat reduced effort than it takes to start up the group. So that's one thing you can do. You could send students our way if you know people who want to get into programming or already know a bit of programming, want to get better. Even if they already know a bit of Scala and want to get better, that's appropriate. If you're in the UK, you could host us. And finally, you could help with curriculum development if that's something you're interested in. So that's all I want to say. It's about 15 minutes. So thank you for listening. I just want to say a quick credit to the person who used the photo that I used in the cover. And so, yeah, are there any questions? Thank you. All right. So I'm not sure what we do for questions. Oh, there we got man to take over.
Folks are welcome to stick around and ask questions. We've got a few minutes, but I just wanted to say thank you, Noel. This is important stuff, and I hope that it inspires more people to help out and to follow in your footsteps here. I helped with a couple of ScalaBridges pre-pandemic, and it was great fun. And I'd love to see more of this.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. And I too would like to see more of it. That's great. Yeah, so any questions, please ask away, or otherwise there's the channel associated with the talk, ScalaBridge channel, and I will answer questions there.
Do we have anything in the chat? We have someone typing in Discord.
Okay. I'll have a look over there, I guess. Okay.
Oh, and here's a question in the chat here. Does the creative Scala portion use Kojo?
No, we don't use Kojo. Why do we not use Kojo? So I think there are two things about Kojo which are perhaps problematic, and this is an interesting thing. So as far as I understand it, Kojo runs in its own environment. And I think that's great for certain situations. But for our situation, I think we want people to use the real, in air quote, tools, because they're going on to industry. And either they already know how to use real tools because they're Scala developers already, or they need to learn how to use them. And I don't want to chop and change lots of different tools. That adds confusion. So, for example, we start with a little bit of worksheets. We don't use Scala CLI. Scala CLI could be used in some parts of the curriculum, but it's relatively new. And I just don't want to introduce too many concepts that are not necessary for the students. The other thing about Kojo is, my understanding is it's a fairly imperative style of programming. And again, I could be wrong. I don't know too much about it. Which is at odds with what we're trying to do in the curriculum. So there are the reasons. But if I'm wrong on those, I'd love to be corrected, and happy to learn more about it.
So over in Discord, we have a question about a potentially tangential issue. Do you have any resources for teaching new to programmers about Git?
Right. Yeah, great question. So I think there's a larger point here, which is that when we think about programming, we usually don't think about process and tools. And process and tools are really important, and we need to teach those. And we do have some kind of explicit instruction on these in ScalaBridge, and there's sort of an expectation that mentors will help students with this as well. Getting to the particular question, do I know anything for Git? I would say there are two things I know of, but I can't vouch if they're great for new developers. So one thing would be the software carpentry series, which is created by a guy whose name escapes me right now, Greg, someone who's a very good teacher. So I expect his material will be very good. And the software carpentry is all about tools and processes. So I imagine their material on Git, I'm fairly sure they have some, would be good. This is something that's like on the long to-do list of things to check out for inclusion in our material. Another thing would be the GitHub tutorials. I don't know how good they are. I did look at them a bit when I started. My approach to Git is very basic. I don't think you need to know all about the DAG model behind Git and all that kind of stuff. You just need to know how to use it. I do think Git is ridiculously complicated, and it's quite a badly made tool from the user interface perspective. So yeah, it's definitely annoying in that respect. I hope that's a useful answer. Not a great answer, I know, but yeah, it's an important issue.
Yeah, so over on Discord, there's a pointer to softwarecarpentry.org. So
yeah, that's great. And it's Greg Wilson, so I'm going to put in there. Yeah, Greg Wilson's the guy. His other book about teaching programming is fantastic as well, if anyone's interested in that. In fact, he has a number of books, and they're all good.
So at this point, we should probably call time so that folks can have a break before the next talk. Thank you very much.